7 women ran. 7 times, Elias Crow watched them disappear into the Colorado snow, leaving him more alone than before. Now, as winter closes in and the 8th bride steps off that wagon, he knows this is his last chance, not at love, but at survival itself. Because up here, in these unforgiving mountains, loneliness doesn't just break you, it buries you. This is the story of the man no one chose, and the woman who refused to run. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The wind came down from the peaks like something with teeth. Elias Crow stood at the edge of his property, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets, watching the trail that cut through the pines. The sky had that heavy gray look, the kind that promised snow before nightfall. He'd seen it 1,000 times. It didn't scare him anymore. What scared him was the silence, not the silence of the mountains. That he understood. That was clean, honest. It was the silence inside the cabin that gutted him. The silence of a table set for one. The silence of conversations he had only with himself. The silence that followed when the door closed and he realized, once again, that he was completely alone. 7 times now. 7 women had come up that trail. 7 women had walked into his life with promises in their eyes and left with nothing but contempt. Or pity. He wasn't sure which was worse. The first one, Catherine, had lasted 3 days. She'd taken one look at the cabin, the mountains pressing in on all sides, and started crying. Quiet at first, then louder. By the 3rd morning, she was hysterical. Elias had driven her back down the mountain himself, her trunk rattling in the wagon bed, neither of them speaking. The 2nd lasted a week. The 3rd, 9 days. After that, he stopped counting. They all had their reasons. Too cold, too isolated, too hard, too him. That last part, they never said out loud. But Elias heard it anyway, in the way they looked at him, or didn't. Like he was part of the landscape, immovable, inconvenient, something to endure rather than know. He couldn't blame them. Not really. Elias wasn't a man built for softness. At 32, he carried himself like the mountains themselves. Broad-shouldered, hard-edged, weathered by wind and work. His hands were scarred from a decade of building, fixing, surviving. His face had forgotten how to smile somewhere around the 5th bride. Maybe earlier. He didn't talk much. Never had. Up here, words felt like a waste of air. You said what needed saying and nothing more. But the women who came, they wanted more. They wanted charm, conversation, warmth. Things Elias had buried so deep he wasn't sure he could dig them up again, even if he tried. So they left. One after another, they packed their trunks, avoided his eyes, and climbed into whatever wagon or cart had brought them up. And Elias would stand right here at this same spot and watch them disappear down the trail. He never stopped them. What was the point? You couldn't make someone stay who didn't want to. You couldn't force a life on someone who saw it as a prison. The wind picked up, cutting through his coat. Elias turned and walked back toward the cabin, boots crunching over frozen ground. Smoke rose from the chimney in a thin, steady line. Inside, the fire would be burning low. He'd need to add wood before it died completely. The cabin sat in a small clearing, surrounded by pines that grew so thick they blocked out the sun for most of the day. Elias had built it himself 8 years ago when he'd first claimed this land. It wasn't much. 1 main room with a kitchen area, a bedroom barely big enough for a bed, and a loft for storage. But it was solid. The walls were tight, the roof didn't leak, and the stone fireplace drew heat into every corner. He'd built it imagining a family. A wife. Kids, maybe. The kind of life his parents had before the fever took them. Instead, he lived here alone. Inside, the cabin was exactly as he'd left it that morning. Clean, organized, empty. Elias added wood to the fire, watched the flames catch, then moved to the kitchen. Dinner would be the same as always. Venison stew from the pot he kept simmering on the stove. Bread he'd baked 3 days ago, now hard enough to break a tooth. Coffee so strong it could strip paint. He ate standing up, staring out the window at the darkening trees. 7 women. The thought circled back, as it always did. He'd tried with each of them. In his own way. He'd been respectful, patient, careful not to crowd them. He'd given them space, time to adjust. He'd explained how things worked up here, the rhythms of the season, the necessities of survival. He'd offered partnership, not servitude. And still, they ran. Elias set his bowl in the basin and scrubbed it clean with water he'd hauled from the creek that morning. His movements were automatic, practiced. This was his life now. Routine, work, silence. The letter had come 2 weeks ago. He'd almost thrown it in the fire without reading it. Almost. But something stopped him, maybe stubbornness, maybe desperation. He wasn't sure anymore. The broker's handwriting was neat, professional. Mr. Crow, I write with cautious optimism. Despite your previous difficulties, I believe I have located a suitable match. Miss Mara Alvarez, age 28, comes highly recommended. Unlike previous candidates, Miss Alvarez has experience with frontier life. She is practical, self-sufficient, and has explicitly requested placement in an isolated location. I must be frank, Mr. Crow. This will be your final arrangement through our services. Given the circumstances, we cannot continue to facilitate matches that do not result in stable placements. Miss Alvarez will arrive on the 14th of November, weather permitting. I trust this time will prove different. Respectfully, Thomas Hartwell. Elias had read it 3 times, then folded it and put it in the drawer with the others. Final arrangement. He understood what that meant. After this, he was done. No more letters, no more wagons bringing hopeful women up the mountain. No more chances. This was it. The 14th was tomorrow. Elias stood at the window, watching snow begin to fall. Light at first, just a dusting. But he knew how quickly that could change. Up here, storms came fast and hit hard. If the weather turned, the wagon might not make it through at all. Part of him almost hoped it wouldn't. What was the point of going through this again? Another woman stepping into his life, looking around with barely concealed horror, counting the days until she could leave. Another failure. Another confirmation that he was meant to live this life alone. But another part of him, smaller, quieter, buried under years of disappointment, still hoped. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe Mara Alvarez, whoever she was, would see something in this life worth staying for. Maybe she'd see something in him worth knowing. Maybe. Elias turned away from the window and banked the fire for the night. Tomorrow, he'd find out. The next morning came cold and sharp. Elias woke before dawn, as always, and went through his routine. Fire, coffee, check the animals. 2 horses, a milk cow, chickens in the coop he'd reinforced last summer. Everything was as it should be. The world was still standing. By mid-morning, the snow had stopped, leaving a fresh white blanket over everything. The trail would be passable, barely. If the wagon was coming, it would be today. Elias forced himself to eat, though he had no appetite. Then he cleaned the cabin. Not that it needed it, he kept things tidy out of habit, but he needed something to do with his hands. He swept the floor, straightened the few books on the shelf, made sure the bedroom door was open so she'd see he'd given her the only real bed while he'd take the loft. Small gestures. Meaningless, probably, but he did them anyway. By noon, he was standing outside again, watching the trail. The wind had died down. The silence was absolute. Then faintly, he heard it. The creak of wagon wheels, the plod of hooves on frozen ground. Elias's chest tightened. The wagon came into view slowly, struggling through the snow. The driver was a man Elias recognized, Ben Carver, who ran supplies up from the nearest town when the roads allowed. Ben didn't look happy. He never did when he had to make this trip. The wagon stopped 20 feet from the cabin. Ben climbed down, shaking snow from his coat. Crow. Ben. Got your delivery. Ben jerked his head toward the back of the wagon. Though I gotta say, this is the worst damn road I've ever taken. Nearly lost a wheel twice. Elias didn't respond. His eyes were on the figure sitting in the back of the wagon, wrapped in a heavy cloak. She hadn't moved yet. Ben opened the tailgate and offered his hand. Miss Alvarez, we're here. The woman stood. Elias got his first real look at her as she stepped down. Mara Alvarez was not what he'd expected. She wasn't delicate or fragile. She was solid, not heavy, but strong, like someone who'd spent their life working. Her hair was dark, pulled back in a braid that fell over one shoulder. Her face was angular, weathered by sun and wind. She wore practical clothes, wool pants, a thick coat, boots that looked like they'd seen real use. But it was her eyes that caught him. Dark, steady, unflinching. She looked at Elias the way she might look at a mountain, assessing, measuring, deciding if it was worth the climb. "Mr. Crow," she said. Her voice was low, calm. "Miss Alvarez." Ben hauled her trunk from the wagon and set it in the snow. "That's everything. I'll be back in the spring, assuming the pass don't close early." Mara nodded. "Thank you." Ben tipped his hat, climbed back onto the wagon, and turned the horses around. Within minutes, he was gone, swallowed by the trees. And then it was just the two of them. The silence stretched. Elias picked up her trunk. It was heavy, but he didn't comment. "I'll show you inside." Mara followed him without a word. Inside, she stopped just past the threshold, looking around. Elias set the trunk down by the bedroom door and waited. She didn't gasp, didn't cry, didn't say it was smaller than she'd imagined or colder than she'd expected. She just looked. At the fireplace, the table, the kitchen, the shelves, the window. Finally, she spoke. "It's clean." Elias blinked. "Yeah." "That's good." She walked to the window and looked out at the clearing, the trees, the mountains beyond. "How far to the nearest town?" 15 miles, more in winter." "And the nearest neighbor?" 8 miles, family named Garrett. Good people. Don't see them much." Mara nodded slowly. She turned back to him. "What do you need from me?" The question caught him off guard. What do you need?" she repeated. "You're not paying a broker for company. You need help." "So, what kind?" Elias stared at her. Every other woman had asked what she'd be doing, what her duties were, what was expected. This was the first time anyone had framed it like this. "Everything," he said finally. "Cooking, cleaning, mending, tending the animals when I'm out, keeping the cabin running. Can you teach me what I don't know?" "Yeah." "Then we'll figure it out." She unbuttoned her cloak and hung it on the peg by the door. Underneath, she wore a plain wool shirt and suspenders. "Show me where things are." Elias did. He showed her the kitchen, where the flour and salt were kept, how the stove worked, where he stored the root vegetables in the cellar. He showed her the bedroom, explained she'd have it while he took the loft. She didn't argue. He showed her the animals, the coop, the woodpile, the creek. She listened, asked questions, took in every detail. By the time they came back inside, the sun was setting. Mara rolled up her sleeves and started a fire in the stove without asking. She found the vegetables, the venison, the pot. Within an hour, she had stew simmering and bread warming. Elias sat at the table watching her move around the kitchen. She worked with efficiency, no wasted motion. She didn't talk, didn't fill the silence with nervous chatter like some of the others had. She just worked. When the stew was ready, she ladled it into 2 bowls and set one in front of him. "Thank you," Elias said. She sat across from him. "You're welcome." They ate in silence. It wasn't uncomfortable. It wasn't warm either. It just was. When they finished, Mara cleared the bowls and washed them without being asked. Then she turned to him. "I'm tired. I'm going to bed." "All right." She paused at the bedroom door. "Elias." He looked up. "I didn't come here to run," she said quietly. "I came here to stay." Then she closed the door. Elias sat alone in the firelight, her words echoing in his mind. "I came here to stay." 7 women had said something similar. 7 women had lied. But Mara Alvarez hadn't said it like a promise. She'd said it like a fact. And for the first time in a long time, Elias felt something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. The first week passed in a blur of work and silence. Mara woke before dawn, same as Elias. She dressed quickly, came out to the main room and got the fire going while he hauled water from the creek. By the time he came back, she had coffee ready. They didn't talk much in the mornings. There wasn't time. There was too much to do. Mara learned fast. Elias showed her how to milk the cow, and by the 3rd day, she was doing it herself. He taught her how to check the chickens for eggs without spooking them, how to split kindling without losing a finger, how to read the sky for incoming weather. She never complained. When her hands blistered from chopping wood, she wrapped them and kept going. When the cold made her fingers stiff, she worked through it. When she didn't know how to do something, she asked once, learned, and didn't ask again. Elias had never seen anyone adapt this quickly. Most of the women who'd come before had treated the work like punishment, something to endure until they could escape. But Mara treated it like life. Just life. The thing you did because it needed doing. On the 5th day, Elias came back from checking the trap line to find her on the roof. He stopped dead, staring up. Mara was balanced on the edge, hammering loose shingles back into place. She'd found his tools, figured out the problem, and fixed it. "What are you doing?" he called up. "Fixing the roof," she said, not looking down. "There's a gap. Snow's getting in. You could fall." "I won't." She didn't. When she climbed down, Elias inspected her work. It was solid, better than solid. It was good. "Where'd you learn that?" he asked. "My father," Mara said, wiping her hands on her pants. "He built houses, said everyone should know how to fix what breaks. Smart man." He was. Was. Past tense. Elias didn't push. That night, over dinner, Mara broke the silence. "How long have you been up here?" 8 years. Alone the whole time? Elias hesitated. "Mostly." She looked at him, waiting. "I've had help before," he said carefully. "Didn't work out." "The women." It wasn't a question. Elias nodded. "How many?" 7. Mara absorbed this. "Why'd they leave?" "Lots of reasons." Elias stared into his bowl. "Too hard. Too cold. Too far from anything. Too you?" He looked up sharply. Mara's expression hadn't changed. She wasn't mocking him. She was just stating it plainly, the way she stated everything. "Yeah," Elias said quietly. "To me." "What's wrong with you?" The question should have stung, but the way she asked it, direct, curious, not cruel, made it bearable. "I don't talk much," Elias said. "Don't know how to make people comfortable. I'm hard to be around, I guess." "You don't seem hard to be around." "You've been here 5 days. Long enough to know if you're cruel or stupid. You're neither." Elias didn't know what to say to that. Mara finished her stew and stood. "The women who left were looking for something you're not. That's not your fault." She washed her bowl and went to bed. Elias sat in the firelight, turning her words over in his mind. Looking for something you're not. Maybe she was right. Maybe they'd come expecting a different kind of man. Someone charming, easy, warm. Someone who'd fill the silence with laughter and promises. That wasn't Elias. He was rough edges and long silences and hands that knew work better than tenderness. But Mara didn't seem to mind. She didn't seem to need him to be anything other than what he was. And that, Elias realized, was something entirely new. On the 8th day, the storm hit. Elias woke to the sound of wind howling through the trees like something alive and angry. Snow was already piling against the windows, and the temperature had dropped so sharply he could see his breath inside the cabin. He got up, added wood to the fire, and looked outside. White. Everything was white. The storm had come in fast overnight, and it wasn't letting up. This was the kind of storm that buried everything. Cabins, trails, livestock. The kind that killed if you weren't prepared. Mara came out of the bedroom, already dressed. "How bad?" "Bad. We need to secure everything. Animals first." They worked together, moving quickly. Elias brought the cow and horses into the small barn he'd built behind the cabin. Mara reinforced the chicken coop with extra boards, making sure the wind couldn't rip it apart. They hauled wood inside, stacking it by the door so they wouldn't have to go out again. By midday, the wind was screaming. The cabin shook. Snow piled so high against the north wall that Elias started worrying about the weight. He checked the supports, reinforced what he could, but there was only so much he could do. Mara worked beside him, holding boards steady while he hammered, passing him tools without being asked. Then, just before dark, they heard it. A crack. Loud, sharp, unmistakable. Elias's stomach dropped. The north wall. They ran. The wall was buckling inward, boards splintering under the pressure of snow and wind. If it gave completely, the whole cabin could collapse. "We have to brace it," Elias shouted over the storm. "How?" "Beams, from the inside. We push it back and hold it." They grabbed every piece of lumber Elias had stored in the loft. Together, they forced the wall back into place, inch by inch, then wedged the beams against it at an angle, bracing them against the floor. It held. Barely. Mara leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Snow had gotten inside through the cracks, dusting her hair and shoulders. "Will it last?" she asked. "Has to." They reinforced it as best they could, using rope, nails, everything Elias had. The wind didn't let up, but the wall held. By the time they finished, it was full dark. They collapsed by the fire, exhausted. Mara pulled off her gloves. Her hands were red, raw from the cold and the work. Elias's weren't much better. "You didn't panic," he said. "Why would I?" "Most people would." "I'm not most people." No, Elias thought. She wasn't. The storm raged for 3 days. They stayed inside, keeping the fire going, rationing food, listening to the wind tear at the cabin. At night, Elias lay in the loft, staring at the ceiling, listening to Mara breathe in the room below. She didn't complain, didn't ask when it would end, didn't look at him like this was his fault. She just endured. On the third night, the wind finally died. Elias woke to silence. He climbed down from the loft and looked outside. The storm had passed. The world was buried under 4 feet of snow, but the sky was clear. Mara came out of the bedroom, hair loose around her shoulders. "Is it over?" "Yeah." They stood together at the window, looking out at the transformed landscape. "We made it," Mara said quietly. "We did." She turned to him. "Elias." "Yeah?" "Thank you." He frowned. "For what?" "For not giving up." Elias didn't know what to say. Mara smiled. Just a little, just enough. Then she went to start breakfast. And Elias stood there, something unfamiliar tightening in his chest. She'd thanked him. Not for saving her, not for protecting her, for not giving up. Like they were in this together, like she saw him as more than just the man who owned the cabin, like she saw him as a partner. For the first time since she'd arrived, Elias let himself believe it. Maybe Mara Alvarez really had come to stay. The days after the storm fell into a rhythm that surprised them both. Elias had expected things to shift, maybe become easier, maybe harder. But what he hadn't expected was how natural it felt to have Mara there. Not like a guest, not like someone waiting for the next wagon out. Like she belonged. She moved through the cabin with purpose, learning the patterns of their life together without needing instruction. She figured out which mornings Elias needed to leave early to check the trap lines and had coffee ready before he woke. She noticed when supplies were running low and made a list without being asked. She found the weak spots in the cabin, loose hinges, drafty corners, boards that needed replacing, and fixed them. But it was more than just the work. It was the way she'd hand him tools before he asked for them. The way she'd take over stirring the pot when his hands were too cold to grip the spoon. The way she'd sit across from him at dinner and eat in comfortable silence, not the strained kind that made his shoulders tight. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. Elias kept waiting for the complaints to start, for the tears, for the look that said she'd made a terrible mistake. It never came. Instead, Mara started asking questions. "Why'd you choose this spot?" she asked one afternoon while they were splitting wood outside. The sky was gray, threatening more snow, but they needed to build up the supply. Elias brought the axe down, splitting a log clean through. The water, creek runs year-round, doesn't freeze all the way through, even in deep winter. And the clearing gets sun most of the day when there's sun to get. Smart, Mara stacked the split pieces. But it's far from everything. That was the point. She looked at him, waiting. Elias set another log on the stump. "Spent time in a town once, Denver, too many people, too much noise, couldn't think straight." "So you came up here?" "Yeah." "Alone?" "Yeah." Mara picked up the axe when he paused, testing its weight. "Show me how you're doing that. I'm not getting a clean split." He adjusted her grip, showed her where to aim, how to let the weight of the axe do the work. She tried again. The log split. Not perfect, but better. "You miss it?" she asked, setting up another piece. "Being around people?" Elias thought about it. "No." "Never?" "Sometimes I'd go down for supplies. See the Garretts maybe twice a year. That was enough." "What about before? You always live out here?" "No." Elias took the axe back, needing something to do with his hands. "Grew up on a farm, Kansas. Parents died when I was 19. Fever took them both in a week. Sold the farm, worked different places, Mines, rail lines, ranches. Saved enough to buy this land, came up here when I was 24. No siblings? Had a sister. She married, moved east. Haven't heard from her in years. Mara was quiet for a moment. Then, my father died 3 years ago. Mother before that. No siblings either. Just me. It was the most she'd said about herself since arriving. Elias stopped splitting. I'm sorry. She shrugged. People die. That's life. Still hard. Yeah. Mara looked out at the trees, her expression unreadable. He taught me everything. Building, fixing, hunting. Said a woman needed to know how to take care of herself because you couldn't count on anyone else to do it. He was right. He usually was. She picked up an armful of wood. I'm going to start dinner. You coming in soon? Few more minutes. She nodded and headed back to the cabin. Elias watched her go, something settling in his chest. She understood this life in a way the others never had. She wasn't trying to make the mountains into something they weren't. She accepted them, the hardship, the isolation, the work, because she'd already learned that lesson somewhere else. People die. Life's hard. You do what needs doing. That night, over venison stew and the last of the bread, Mara broke the silence again. The women who were here before me, what were they like? Elias set down his spoon. Why do you want to know? Curious? You said 7. That's a lot of failed attempts. Not sure I'd call them attempts, more like disasters. Mara's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Tell me anyway. Elias leaned back in his chair, trying to remember. They'd all blurred together after a while, but some details stuck. First one was Catherine. City girl from Philadelphia. Cried most of the time she was here. Second was Anne. Lasted longer, but she kept asking when we'd move somewhere else. Somewhere warmer. I told her this was it. She left the next week. What about the others? Elizabeth was afraid of everything. The dark, the animals, the silence. Rebecca complained about the food, the cold, the cabin. Said it was like living in a prison. Elias shook his head. Margaret tried. I'll give her that. But she got sick, just a cold, and panicked. Thought she was dying. Made me take her down to town and she never came back. And the last 2? Sarah barely spoke. Moved around like a ghost for a month. Then one morning she was just gone. Left a note saying she couldn't do it. Julia was different. She was angry. Angry at me, at the cabin, at the whole situation. We fought more in 2 weeks than I've talked to anyone in years. She left cursing my name. Mara absorbed this, her expression thoughtful. They all came from cities? Mostly. That was the first mistake. Elias blinked. What do you mean? You can't take someone who spent their whole life around people in comfort and drop them on a mountain. They don't know what they're signing up for. Mara leaned forward. Where'd you come from before here? Told you, Kansas farm, then all over. Exactly. You knew hard work. You knew isolation. You knew how to survive with nothing. She gestured around the cabin. This isn't punishment to you. It's just life. But to them, it was hell. Elias hadn't thought about it like that. The broker should have asked better questions, Mara continued. Should have found women who already knew what frontier life looked like, not women dreaming of some romantic mountain adventure. You knew, Elias said quietly. That's why you asked to be placed somewhere isolated. I knew I didn't want to be crowded, didn't want noise and people and expectations. Mara met his eyes. I wanted space to breathe. That's what this place is. Space. Something passed between them in that moment. An understanding that went deeper than words. Why'd you really come up here? Elias asked. You could have gone anywhere. Why this? Mara was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was careful, measured. After my father died, I stayed in town, tried to make it work. But people, they look at a woman alone and see someone who needs saving or taking advantage of. I got tired of men showing up at my door with proposals that had nothing to do with marriage and everything to do with my land. Tired of being treated like I couldn't think for myself. So you left. So I left. She stood and started clearing the table. Wrote to the broker, told him I wanted somewhere no one would bother me, somewhere I could work and not have to smile and pretend to be grateful for scraps of respect. And he sent you here. He did. Mara glanced at him over her shoulder. Warned me about you, actually. Elias stiffened. What'd he say? That you'd had trouble keeping wives, that you were difficult, that the last woman called you cold and unfeeling. She set the dishes in the basin. I told him that sounded perfect. Elias couldn't help it. He laughed, short, sharp, surprised. Mara turned, and this time she did smile. Small, but real. You're not cold, she said. You're just quiet. There's a difference. Most people don't see it that way. Most people are idiots. This time Elias's laugh was longer, easier. It felt strange in his chest, like a muscle he'd forgotten how to use. Mara washed the dishes while he dried. They worked side by side, shoulders almost touching in the small kitchen space. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Storm's coming back, Elias said. How can you tell? Wind's changed direction, and the cold, it's got weight to it. Mara tested the air, breathing deep. You're right. I feel it. We should check the barn. Make sure the animals have enough feed to last a few days. They bundled up and headed out into the growing darkness. The temperature had dropped sharply, and the first flakes of snow were already falling. Elias led the way to the barn, Mara close behind. Inside, the horses shifted in their stalls, sensing the change in weather. The cow lowed softly. Elias checked their water, broke the thin layer of ice that had formed, and hauled in extra hay from the loft. Mara inspected the roof, checking for leaks they might have missed. Looks solid. Good. They worked quickly, efficiently. When everything was secured, they stood in the barn doorway, watching snow fall in thick curtains. How long will this one last? Mara asked. Day, maybe 2. Not as bad as the last one. How can you tell? The sky. It's not as heavy. And the wind. It's steady, not wild. Mara nodded, filing the information away. She did that a lot, Elias noticed. Stored knowledge like she was building a library in her head. They ran back to the cabin through the snow. Inside, Elias built up the fire while Mara lit the lamps. The cabin glowed warm against the darkness outside. We have enough supplies? She asked. Yeah, plenty of wood. Food stores are good. We could last a month if we had to. You plan well. Have to. Up here, mistakes get you killed. Mara sat down in the chair by the fire, pulling off her boots. What's the worst mistake you've made? Elias hesitated. You really want to know? I wouldn't ask if I didn't. He sat across from her. First winter I was here, I didn't stock enough firewood. Thought I had plenty. I was wrong. By February I was burning furniture to stay warm. Nearly froze to death before the thaw came. How'd you survive? Stubbornness, mostly. And luck. Elias stared into the fire. Learned my lesson. Now I cut twice as much wood as I think I'll need. Good policy. Mara stretched her feet toward the heat. I made a mistake once. Big one. What happened? Trusted the wrong person. Her voice went flat. Man came around after my father died. Said he'd help me manage the property, take care of the business side of things. I believed him. Signed papers I shouldn't have. By the time I realized what he'd done, he'd sold half my land out from under me. Elias felt anger rise in his chest. You get it back? No. Gone was gone. I sold what was left before he could take that too. She looked at him. That's when I wrote to the broker. Figured if I was starting over, I'd do it somewhere no one could touch. I'm sorry that happened to you. Don't be. I learned. Mara's eyes hardened. Won't make that mistake again. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Outside, the storm built itself into something bigger, but inside the cabin held strong. Elias, Mara said eventually. Yeah? This thing we're doing, this arrangement, what exactly is it? The question caught him off guard. What do you mean? I mean, am I your wife, your housekeeper, your partner? She turned to face him fully. Because the broker called it a marriage arrangement, but you've never touched me. Never tried. You gave me the bedroom and took the loft. We work together like business partners, not husband and wife. Elias's throat went tight. I didn't want to assume anything. Didn't want you to feel trapped or... I'm asking what you want, Mara interrupted. Not what you think I want. What do you want from this? He looked at her, really looked. At the strong line of her jaw, the steadiness in her eyes, the way she sat like she owned every inch of space she occupied. I want a real marriage, he said finally. Not just someone living under my roof. I want a partner. Someone who's here because they choose to be, not because they're obligated. And if I choose to be here, then I'd like to build something real with you, if you're willing. Mara studied him for a long moment. Then she stood and crossed the small space between them. She held out her hand. I'm willing. Elias took her hand. Her grip was strong, calloused, certain. But, Mara said, you need to earn it. He frowned. What? A real marriage isn't just deciding it's real. It's work. It's showing up every day. It's learning each other. She squeezed his hand. I'll stay. I'll work beside you. I'll build this life with you. But if you want me to be your wife in every sense, you have to earn that. Prove you're in this as much as I am. How do I prove it? Prove by not giving up when things get hard, by talking to me instead of shutting down, by letting me in. She released his hand. Think you can do that? Elias nodded. Yeah, I can do that. Good. Mara stepped back. Then let's start over, properly this time. She held out her hand again, formal this time. I'm Mara Alvarez. I came here looking for a life that's mine, for space to breathe and work worth doing. I don't need saving, and I don't need soft words. I need honesty and respect and someone who won't quit. Elias stood and took her hand. I'm Elias Crow. I built this place with my own hands, and I've lived here alone for 8 years. I'm not good with words, and I'm better with silence than conversation. But I work hard. I keep my promises, and I don't quit either. They shook, the agreement settling between them like something solid. There, Mara said. Now we know where we stand. Yeah, Elias said. We do. That night, Elias lay in the loft listening to the storm and thinking about what had just happened. Mara had drawn a line, not to push him away, but to make sure they were both clear about what they were building. She wasn't going to settle for scraps, wasn't going to accept half measures or assumptions. She wanted something real, and she was willing to work for it. But she expected him to work for it too. Elias could respect that, more than respect it. He needed it. Needed someone who wouldn't just accept whatever he offered, but who'd push back, demand more, make him be better. For the first time since Mara had arrived, Elias let himself imagine a future that didn't end with her leaving. A future where the cabin wasn't silent, where dinner wasn't a meal alone, where the work was shared and the burden lighter because there were two of them carrying it. Maybe this could work. Maybe they could build something that lasted. The storm blew itself out by morning. Elias woke to sunlight streaming through the loft window and the smell of coffee brewing below. He climbed down to find Mara already dressed, breakfast on the table. Morning, she said. Morning. They ate quickly, then went out to assess the damage. The snow was deep but manageable. The barn had held. The chicken coop needed some repairs where the wind had torn loose a board, but nothing major. They worked together, falling into the rhythm they'd built over the past weeks. Mara held the board steady, while Elias nailed it back into place. They cleared snow from the paths, checked on the animals, hauled fresh water from the creek. By afternoon, everything was back in order. I'm going to check the trap line, Elias said. Want to come? Mara looked surprised. You're asking? Yeah, figured it's time you learned the territory. In case something happens to me, you'll need to know where everything is. All right. They set out into the woods, Elias leading the way. The forest was transformed by the snow, quiet, pristine, beautiful in a harsh way. He showed her the landmarks he used to navigate, a lightning split pine, a boulder shaped like a sleeping bear, a creek crossing where the water ran fast and clear. You set the traps in a pattern? Mara asked, studying the trees. Yeah, rough circle about 2 miles out from the cabin. Check them every 3 days in winter, more often if the weather's mild. What are you catching? Rabbits mostly, some fox, marten if I'm lucky. Sell the furs in town when I go down for supplies. They reached the first trap. Empty. Elias reset it and moved on. The second had caught a rabbit. Elias dispatched it quickly, cleanly, and added it to his pack. You know how to skin these? He asked. Yeah, my father taught me. Good. I'll show you how I do it in case it's different. They checked the rest of the line. 3 more rabbits, 1 marten. Not a bad haul. On the way back, Elias pointed out other things. Which plants were edible, which trees made the best firewood, where the deer trails ran. Mara absorbed it all, asking questions that showed she was really listening. "Why do you like it up here?" she asked as they neared the cabin. Elias considered. "It's honest. The mountains don't lie. They don't pretend to be something they're not. If you're prepared, you survive. If you're not, you don't. There's a clarity to that. No politics, no games." "Exactly," Mara smiled. "I knew I came to the right place." Back at the cabin, Elias showed her his skinning technique. She watched carefully, then took over on the second rabbit. Her hands were steady, practiced. She worked efficiently, wasting nothing. "Your father taught you well," Elias said. "He believed in being useful, said there was no point in knowing things halfway." He was right. They worked side by side until all the animals were cleaned and the meat stored. The furs went on stretching frames in the corner to dry. That night, Mara made rabbit stew with wild onions and the last of the potatoes. It was the best meal Elias had eaten in months. "This is good," he said. "Thanks." Mara ladled more into his bowl. "You're easy to cook for. You actually appreciate it." "Why wouldn't I?" "Some men expect it, like it's owed to them, not earned." She sat down across from him. "You say thank you. You notice the work. That matters. You do half the work around here. More than half lately. I'd be an idiot not to appreciate it." 7 other women lived here? Did you thank them?" Elias thought back. "I tried to. Don't think they believed I meant it." "Why not?" "Because I didn't know how to show it any other way. I'd say the words, but I didn't know what else to do." He set down his spoon. "With you, it's different. You don't need me to perform gratitude. You just need me to pull my weight." Exactly. Mara broke off a piece of bread. "We're a team. Teams don't grovel to each other. They just work. You see this as a team? Don't you?" Elias looked at her, at the woman who'd fixed his roof, survived the storm, learned his trap lines, challenged him to be better. "Yeah," he said. "I do." "Good. Then we're on the same page." After dinner, they sat by the fire. Mara was mending one of his shirts where the sleeve had torn. Elias was working on a new handle for the axe. The old one had started to splinter. "Tell me about the Garretts," Mara said, without looking up from her stitching. "What about them? You said they were your nearest neighbors. What are they like?" "Good people. Henry and Martha, been up here longer than me. They have 3 kids, all grown now. 2 moved away, 1 stayed to help run the place." "You close with them?" "Not close, but friendly. They helped me when I first got here, taught me things about living up here that I didn't know. I help them when they need an extra pair of hands." "Think I'll like them?" The question made Elias pause. It implied a future where Mara would meet them, where she'd be introduced as his wife, where she'd become part of the small community that existed up here. "Yeah," he said. "I think you will. Martha's tough, practical. You'd get along." "When do we see them next?" "Spring, probably. Roads will be clear enough for visiting by late April." Mara nodded, making a note of it. They worked in comfortable silence. Outside, the wind had picked up again, but it wasn't the screaming kind. Just steady, constant, the sound of winter settling in for the long haul. "Elias," Mara said eventually. "Yeah?" "This is working." He looked up. "What is?" "This, us. The way we're doing things." She tied off the thread and held up the shirt, inspecting her work. "I wasn't sure it would, but it is." "You had doubts?" "Of course I had doubts. I came up here knowing nothing about you except what a broker told me. For all I knew, you could have been cruel or crazy or—" She stopped. "But you're not. You're just a man trying to live his life on his own terms. I respect that." "I respect you too," Elias said. "More than you know." Mara met his eyes. "Then keep showing me. Every day. That's all I need." "I will." She handed him the mended shirt. "Good as new." Elias took it, their fingers brushing briefly. The touch was brief, casual, but it carried weight. An acknowledgement of what was building between them. Something slow, careful, but real. The weeks turned into a month. Winter tightened its grip on the mountains, and the world beyond the cabin became unreachable. But inside, life continued. Work, meals, conversations by the fire. Mara became part of the landscape. Not an intruder, but a fixture. As natural as the trees or the creek or the mountains themselves. Elias stopped thinking of the cabin as his and started thinking of it as theirs. She carved out her own spaces without asking permission. A corner for the books she'd brought, a shelf for the small things she'd collected, smooth stones from the creek, pine cones from the forest. Her coat hanging next to his by the door. And Elias let her. More than let her. He welcomed it. One night she asked him something he didn't expect. "Do you ever regret it?" "Regret what?" "Coming up here. Choosing this life." Elias thought about it. Really thought. "No," he said finally. "It's hard and it's lonely sometimes, but it's mine. I built it. No one can take it from me." "And if you hadn't come here, what would you have done?" "Don't know. Worked myself to death on someone else's land, probably, or ended up in a city I hated, doing work that didn't matter." He looked at her. "What about you? You regret coming here?" "No." Mara's answer came quick, certain. "I regret a lot of things, but not this." They sat with that truth between them. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the fire burned steady. And for the first time in 8 years, Elias Crow didn't feel alone. February came with a cold so brutal it made the previous months feel like autumn. The kind of cold that froze spit before it hit the ground and turned breath into clouds of ice. Elias had lived through winters like this before, but never with someone else to worry about. Mara handled it better than he expected. She wrapped herself in layers, kept the fire burning hot, and worked through the discomfort without complaint. But Elias noticed the way her hands shook sometimes when she came in from feeding the chickens, the way she'd stand close to the stove longer than necessary. "You're cold," he said one morning, watching her cradle a cup of coffee like it was the only warm thing in the world. "Of course I'm cold. It's freezing." "I mean more than usual." Mara shrugged. "I'll manage. There's extra blankets in the trunk, and I've got a spare coat that might fit better than the one you're wearing." "I'm fine, Elias." "You're shivering." "So are you." He couldn't argue with that. The cold had gotten into the cabin despite their best efforts. Ice formed on the inside of the windows overnight. The water in the basin froze solid. Even with the fire roaring, the temperature barely climbed above tolerable. "We need to insulate better," Mara said, setting down her coffee. "The walls are losing too much heat." "I've packed mud in the gaps already." "Not enough. We need something more." She walked over to the north wall, pressing her hand against it. "This whole side is ice cold. The wind's getting through somewhere." Elias joined her, running his own hand along the wood. She was right. The wall was practically frozen. "We could pack it with pine boughs," he said. "Layer them between the inner and outer walls if we can get in there. Or use the animal pelts, the ones that aren't good enough to sell." Elias considered it. They had a pile of furs with holes or tears, still good for insulation, but worthless at market. That could work. They spent the next 2 days tearing apart the north wall from the inside and rebuilding it with layers of fur sandwiched between the boards. It was brutal work in the cold, their fingers going numb despite gloves. But by the time they finished, the difference was immediate. The wall held heat. "Better," Mara said, pressing her hand against it. "Much better." That night the cabin was warmer than it had been in weeks. They sat by the fire, both exhausted, both satisfied. "You're good at this?" Elias said. "At what?" "Problem solving, figuring things out." "Had to be. My father didn't tolerate helplessness." Mara stretched her legs toward the fire. "He'd break something on purpose sometimes, just to see if I could fix it. Said the world was full of broken things, and not enough people who knew how to make them work again." "Sounds like a hard man." "He was, but he was fair." She looked at Elias. "You remind me of him sometimes." "How?" "You don't waste words, don't make promises you can't keep. Don't expect the world to be easy just because you want it to be." Elias didn't know how to respond to that. Being compared to someone Mara respected felt significant, heavier than casual conversation. "I'll take that as a compliment," he said finally. "It is." They fell quiet. Outside, the wind had died down completely, leaving the night eerily still. Elias stood and looked out the window. The moon was full, casting blue light across the snow. "It's beautiful," Mara said, coming to stand beside him. "Yeah. You ever think about leaving, going somewhere warmer?" "No, this is home." "Even when it's this hard?" "Especially then." Elias turned to her. "The easy places are crowded. Everyone wants them. Up here you have to earn it. That makes it worth something. Mara nodded slowly. I get that. They stood together, shoulders almost touching, watching the moonlight. And in that moment, Elias felt something shift. Not dramatically, not with fireworks or grand gestures, just a quiet settling, like pieces finally finding where they belonged. Elias? Mara said softly. Yeah? I'm glad I'm here. Me too. She turned to face him fully. Her eyes were dark in the dim light, serious and searching. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. His chest tightened. All right. Is this just an arrangement to you? Just convenience? Or is there something more? Elias had known this question was coming eventually, had felt it building between them for weeks. But now that it was here, the words stuck in his throat. I don't know how to answer that, he said finally. Yes, you do. You're just afraid to say it. I'm not afraid. Then say it. Mara's voice was firm but not unkind. Tell me the truth. What do you want from this? From me. Elias looked at her, really looked, at the woman who'd stayed when 7 others had run, who'd worked beside him without complaint, who'd challenged him, pushed him, made him think about things he'd buried years ago. I want more than an arrangement, he said. I want a real marriage, a real partnership, someone who's here because they choose to be, not because they're obligated. He paused, then pushed forward. I want you to be my wife. Actually, not just on paper. And what does that mean to you? Being a wife? It means we build this life together, make decisions together, face things together. It means, he struggled for the words, it means I stop living like I'm alone even when you're standing right next to me. Mara was quiet for a long moment. Then she stepped closer. You've been hurt, she said, by all those women leaving, by being rejected over and over. I see it in the way you hold yourself back, like you're waiting for me to run too. Elias wanted to deny it, but he couldn't. Yeah, he admitted. I'm waiting for it. Stop. I can't just stop waiting for me to leave, Elias. I'm not them. Mara reached out and took his hand. Her grip was strong, steady. I told you on the first day. I came here to stay. I meant it. How can you be sure? It's only been 2 months. I know what I want, and I know what I don't. She squeezed his hand. I don't want to go back to a town where men think they can take what's mine. I don't want to smile and be polite and small. I don't want easy. I want this. I want you. The words hit him harder than he expected. You want me, he repeated, barely a whisper. Yes, but I need you to want this too. Really want it. Not just accept it because I'm the only option left. Her eyes searched his face. So I'm asking you straight. Is this just survival, or is it something more? Elias felt the walls he'd built around himself starting to crack. All those years of silence, of keeping people at arm's length, of protecting himself from disappointment. They'd worked. He'd survived. But he'd also been dying, slowly, one lonely day at a time. Mara was offering him a way out, a way forward. It's more, he said, his voice rough. It's been more since the storm. Maybe before, like... Then show me. How? Stop holding back. Stop treating me like I'm going to break or run. Stop waiting for permission to be part of this. She moved closer until there was barely any space between them. I'm strong enough for this, Elias. But I need you to be strong enough too. Something in him snapped, not broke, but released. All the fear and doubt and careful distance he'd been maintaining dissolved. Elias pulled her close and kissed her. It wasn't smooth or practiced. It was clumsy, urgent, real. Mara kissed him back just as fiercely, her hands fisting in his shirt. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, something fundamental had changed. There, Mara said, her forehead resting against his. That's a start. Elias laughed. Actually laughed. The sound surprised them both. A start? You think one kiss makes us married? She smiled against his mouth. We've got work to do, Crow. What kind of work? The kind where you learn to let me in, where you talk instead of going silent, where you trust that I'm not going anywhere. She pulled back just enough to look at him. Can you do that? I can try. That's all I'm asking. They stood there, wrapped in each other, the cabin warm around them and the mountains silent outside. For the first time in 8 years, Elias felt the loneliness that had been his constant companion finally, truly, leave. That night, Mara didn't go to the bedroom alone. She climbed up to the loft with Elias, and they lay together in the narrow bed, her back pressed against his chest, his arm wrapped around her waist. "This is going to be cramped," she said. "Yeah, we should build a bigger bed." "Yeah, but not tonight." "No, not tonight." She settled against him, her breathing evening out. Elias stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of her against him, the warmth of her body, the reality of not being alone. "Elias?" she murmured, half asleep. "Don't let go." "I won't." And he didn't. The next morning, they woke tangled together, both stiff from the cramped space, but neither complaining. Mara stretched, her elbow catching Elias in the ribs. "Sorry," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "We really do need a bigger bed." "Add it to the list." The list had been Mara's idea, a running tally of everything they wanted to do to the cabin once spring came. Bigger bed, expand the kitchen, build a proper porch, fix the chicken coop door that stuck, plant a garden, things that assumed a future. Together. They went about their morning routine with a new ease. Small touches became normal, her hand on his shoulder as she passed, his fingers brushing her back as he reached for the coffee pot. Nothing dramatic, just the quiet intimacy of two people learning how to share space completely. Over breakfast, Mara brought up something she'd been thinking about. "We should go visit the Garretts." Elias looked up, surprised. "Now? In the middle of winter? Why not? You said they're only 8 miles away. Weather's been clear for 3 days. We could make it there and back before dark if we left early." "It's risky. Storm could come in. You'd know if a storm was coming. You read the weather better than anyone I've met." She leaned forward. "I want to meet them. I want them to know I'm here, that I stayed." Elias understood what she wasn't saying. She wanted to be recognized as his wife, wanted to stake her claim on this life publicly, not just between the two of them. "All right," he said. "We'll go tomorrow if the weather holds." Mara's smile was bright, genuine. "Good." The next morning dawned clear and cold. They packed supplies, food in case they got delayed, extra blankets, rope. Elias saddled both horses while Mara made sure the cabin was secure. The ride to the Garretts' place took most of the morning. The trail was buried under snow, forcing them to go slow, but the horses were sure-footed and the sky stayed clear. Mara rode well, Elias noticed. Another skill her father had taught her. The Garrett homestead appeared through the trees just before noon, a larger cabin than Elias's, with a barn and several outbuildings. Smoke rose from the chimney. Dogs started barking as they approached. Henry Garrett came out onto the porch, rifle in hand until he recognized Elias. Then his weathered face broke into a grin. "Crow, didn't expect to see anyone this time of year." His eyes moved to Mara. "And you brought company." Elias dismounted and helped Mara down. "Henry, this is Mara, my wife." Saying it out loud made it real in a new way. Henry's eyebrows went up. "Wife? Well, I'll be damned," he called over his shoulder. "Martha, get out here. Elias got himself married." Martha Garrett appeared, wiping flour from her hands. She was a solid woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She looked Mara up and down, assessing. "About time," she said to Elias. Then to Mara, "You must be tougher than the others, or crazier. Come inside before you freeze." Inside, the Garrett cabin was warm and lived in, with the comfortable clutter of a family home. Their son Daniel was there too, a man about Elias's age, quiet and reserved like his father. Martha put coffee on while Henry peppered Elias with questions. How'd they meet? When'd they marry? Why hadn't he said anything? Elias answered simply, honestly. Mail order arrangement. She arrived in November. They decided to make it real. Throughout it all, Martha was watching Mara, not unkindly but carefully, measuring. Finally, she spoke directly to her. "You know what you signed up for? Living up here with this one?" She jerked her head at Elias. "Yes, ma'am." "He's not easy. Quiet as a stone and just as stubborn." "I noticed." "And you stayed anyway?" "I did." Martha studied her a moment longer, then nodded. "Good." "He needed someone with spine." She poured coffee into thick mugs. "The others were too soft." City girls playing frontier. You're different. How can you tell? Your hands. Martha gestured to Mara's scarred, calloused palms. Those are working hands, real ones. Mara smiled. My father taught me that work worth doing leaves marks. Smart man. Martha handed her coffee. You'll do fine up here. Over the next few hours, they talked. Henry and Elias discussed plans for spring, fencing that needed repair, lumber they could trade, news from town. Martha showed Mara her kitchen setup, her root cellar, her techniques for preserving food through the winter. That's it. You've got to stay ahead of it, Martha explained. Up here you can't run to the store when you run out. You plan, you preserve, you make do. That's what we've been doing. And how's your supply situation? Good. Elias stocks well. Martha glanced toward the main room where the men were talking. He's learned. First few years, he was barely scraping by. Too proud to ask for help, too stubborn to admit he didn't know everything. She lowered her voice. But he's a good man. Honest. Works harder than anyone I've met. He'll take care of you. We take care of each other, Mara corrected gently. Martha smiled. Even better. By mid-afternoon, the wind had started to pick up. Elias noticed the change immediately. We should head back, he said. Storm's coming. Henry looked out the window. You sure? Sky's still clear. Wind shifted, and the temperature's dropping too fast. Elias stood. If we leave now, we'll beat it home. They bundled up and said their goodbyes. Martha hugged Mara, a quick, fierce embrace. You come back in spring, she said. We'll have a proper visit. I will. Henry shook Elias's hand. You did good, Crow. Real good. The ride back was faster, both of them pushing to stay ahead of the weather. Elias had been right. By the time they reached the cabin, the sky had turned gray, and the first flakes were starting to fall. They got the horses settled, brought in extra wood, and secured everything just as the storm hit. Inside, breathless and cold, they looked at each other and started laughing. You cut that close, Mara said. We made it, didn't we? Barely. They warmed up by this fire, shedding layers and thawing frozen fingers. Outside, the wind began to howl, but they were safe, prepared together. I liked them, Mara said. The Garretts. They liked you too, I could tell. Martha's tough. Has to be. She's been up here 20 years. Mara was quiet for a moment. Think I'll be like her? In 20 years? Elias looked at her, at the woman who'd ridden 8 miles through snow to meet his neighbors, who'd handled Martha's scrutiny without flinching, who'd insisted on being recognized as his wife. Yeah, he said, but stronger. She laughed. Careful, Crow. That almost sounded like a compliment. It was. That night, the storm raged outside, but inside they were warm, fed, content. They'd crossed another threshold, made their partnership public, claimed each other in front of witnesses. As they lay together in the loft, Mara spoke into the darkness. This is real now. It was real before. Not like this. Now people know. Now it's not just us deciding, it's the world recognizing it. Elias pulled her closer. Does that change anything? No, but it matters. She turned to face him. I want you to know something. What? I'm not going to run. Ever. No matter how hard it gets, no matter what happens, I'm staying. Mara, let me finish. Her hand found his in the dark. I know you're still waiting for it. For the moment, I change my mind and leave. But it's not coming. This is where I belong. With you. Elias felt his throat tighten. How can you be so sure? Because I've spent my whole life looking for a place that felt right, that felt like mine. I found it. She squeezed his hand. You gave me that. Whether you know it or not, you gave me home. And I don't give up home. Something broke in Elias then. The last piece of armor he'd been holding on to. The fear that had kept him distant even as they grew closer. The certainty that eventually, inevitably, she'd leave like all the others. It shattered, and in its place, finally, was trust. I believe you, he said, his voice raw. Good. Because I mean it. They held each other through the night, the storm raging and the cabin standing strong, and Elias Crow let himself believe, for the first time, that he'd found something that would last. The storm blew itself out after 2 days. When it cleared, the world was buried under 3 feet of fresh snow. But the cabin had held. They had held. And as they dug out from the drifts, working side by side like they'd been doing it for years instead of months, Elias realized something profound. He wasn't alone anymore. Not just because Mara was physically here, but because she'd become part of him. Part of his thoughts, his plans, his future. When he looked ahead now, he didn't see himself. He saw them. And that didn't scare him anymore. It gave him hope. March brought a slight thaw, just enough to make travel barely possible. Elias needed to go down to town for supplies. Salt, flour, things they couldn't make or grow themselves. Normally he'd go alone, but this time Mara insisted on coming. I want to see the town, meet the people, get the lay of the land. It's a rough trip, 2 days each way. I can handle it. She could. Elias knew that now. They set out on a clear morning, both on horseback, pack horses trailing behind for the supplies they'd bring back. The trail down the mountain was treacherous, ice hidden under snow, steep grades, narrow passages. Mara handled it all without complaint. The town, when they finally reached it, was exactly what Elias had described. Small, rough, functional. A general store, a blacksmith, a church, a handful of houses. Nothing fancy, nothing soft. People stared as they rode in. Elias rarely came down, and never with company. At the general store, the owner, a man named Hutchins, couldn't hide his surprise. Crow, didn't expect you till spring. Needed supplies. Hutchins' eyes moved to Mara. And you brought my wife, Mara. If Hutchins had been surprised before, he was shocked now. Wife? You got married? I did. Well, I'll be. Hutchins looked between them, clearly trying to reconcile the solitary Elias he knew with this new reality. Congratulations, I suppose. Thank you, Mara said evenly. We need flour, salt, coffee, and sugar, and nails if you have them. Hutchins blinked at her directness, then nodded. Yes, ma'am, I'll get that together. While he gathered their order, other townspeople drifted in, curious. Word spread fast in small towns. By the time they were loading their supplies, half the town knew Elias Crow had a wife. Most were polite. A few were skeptical. One man, drunk at midday, made the mistake of being crude. How long you think this one'll last? He said loudly to his friends. Crows run off, 6 women already? 7? Mara stopped loading the pack horse and turned to face him. 7, she said calmly, and I'm number 8. The man laughed. So what makes you different, sweetheart? I'm not your sweetheart. Mara stepped closer. And what makes me different is I know what I want. Those other women didn't. They came up that mountain looking for something that wasn't there. I came looking for exactly what I found. The man's smile faded. And what's that? A life that's mine. A man who doesn't need me to be something I'm not. And a place where people mind their own damn business. She stared him down. So I'll last. Count on it. The man opened his mouth, then closed it. He mumbled something and turned away. Elias, who'd been watching from near the horses, felt pride surge through his chest. Mara hadn't needed him to defend her. She'd handled it herself. Direct, fearless, final. They finished loading and headed to the saloon for a hot meal before making camp for the night. Inside, they found a table in the corner. The food was mediocre, but after weeks of their own cooking, it tasted different enough to be interesting. You made an impression, Elias said. Good. Let them talk. Let them know I'm not going anywhere. That man was an idiot. Most are. Mara took a bite of stew. But they need to understand, I'm not like the others. I'm not some fragile thing that'll break under pressure. I know. Do you? She looked at him seriously. Really know? Or are you still waiting? Elias set down his fork. I was. But I'm not anymore. What changed? You did. Or maybe I did. Maybe we both did. He reached across the table and took her hand. I trust you, Mara. Completely. Her expression softened. Good, because I need you to. They finished their meal in comfortable silence. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the snow orange and pink. They'd camp tonight, start back up the mountain in the morning. As they left the saloon, Elias noticed Mara looking around the town with an expression he couldn't quite read. What are you thinking? That I made the right choice. She looked at him. This place is fine for supplies, but I wouldn't want to live here. Too many people, too much noise. Even in winter when it's mostly empty? Even then, she smiled. I like our mountain better. Our mountain, not his, not hers, theirs. Elias pulled her close and kissed her right there in the middle of the street, not caring who saw. When they broke apart, Mara was grinning. What was that for? Because I wanted to. Well, she looped her arm through his. Do it more often. They made camp outside town, under a shelter of pines. The fire burned bright, keeping the cold at bay. They'd brought bedrolls and they lay close together, watching stars appear between the branches. Elias, Mara said quietly. Yeah? When we get back, I want to start planning, really planning. For what? For everything. The garden in spring, expanding the cabin, building that bigger bed. She paused. A nursery. Elias's breath caught. A nursery? Eventually, not right away, but someday. She turned to look at him. Is that something you want? He thought about it. About the cabin filling with more than just the two of them. About teaching a child the things his father had taught him. About a legacy beyond just survival. Yeah, he said. Someday. Good. She settled back against him. Then we'll build toward that. They fell asleep under the stars, and Elias dreamed of a future he'd stopped believing in years ago. A future with roots, with permanence, with family. A future with Mara. The journey back up the mountain took 3 days instead of 2. A late storm caught them halfway, forcing them to take shelter in a shallow cave Elias knew from previous trips. They huddled together with the horses, keeping the fire small to conserve wood, waiting for the weather to break. This happen often? Mara asked, pressing close to him for warmth. Often enough. Weather up here doesn't follow rules. Good thing we packed extra food. Good thing you insisted on it. Elias added a small branch to the fire. I would have packed light. I noticed. You take too many risks. Calculated risks. Still risks. She shifted, getting comfortable against his shoulder. We're a team now. That means we both make it back, or neither of us goes in the first place. Elias understood what she was saying. His survival wasn't just his own anymore. If something happened to him, she'd be alone on the mountain. And if something happened to her, he'd be right back where he started. Except now it would hurt 1,000 times worse because he knew what he'd lost. You're right, he said. I know I am. The storm cleared by morning, and they made it home by nightfall. The cabin stood exactly as they'd left it, solid and waiting. Inside, everything was cold but intact. Elias got the fire going while Mara unpacked their supplies. Home, she said, looking around the small space with obvious satisfaction. Feels good to be back? Better than good? She hung her coat on the peg. I missed this place. Elias had missed it too, but hearing her say it, hearing her claim it as home, meant something more. This wasn't just the place she was stuck, it was the place she wanted to be. They settled back into their routine quickly. The supplies from town restocked their depleted stores. The weather began its slow, uncertain shift toward spring. Ice still formed every night, but the days grew incrementally longer, incrementally warmer. One morning in late March, Mara woke Elias before dawn. Get up, I want to show you something. What? Just come. He followed her outside, both of them wrapped in coats against the pre-dawn cold. She led him to the eastern edge of the clearing and pointed. There, just visible in the gray light, were the first green shoots of spring pushing through the snow. How'd you find these? Elias asked. I've been checking every morning for a week. Mara crouched down, touching one of the shoots gently. Spring's coming, really coming. Elias looked at her face, at the way the growing light caught her features, at the genuine joy in her expression over something as simple as new growth. In that moment, he realized he loved her. Not the careful, measured feeling he'd been building, not the practical partnership they'd agreed to, but actual love, deep, certain, overwhelming. He didn't say it. Not yet. The words felt too big, too important to just blurt out at dawn over winter grass. But he felt it, and he knew. We should start planning the garden, Mara said, standing. Figure out what we want to grow, where to put it. All right. They spent that morning sketching plans in the dirt by the fire. Mara wanted vegetables, carrots, potatoes, beans, squash. Elias suggested herbs, things that would keep and could be dried for winter. They argued good-naturedly about placement, about how much space they'd need, about whether they should build a fence to keep animals out. "We're doing this," Mara said, looking at their rough plans. "Really doing this." "You sound surprised." "I am, a little. 6 months ago, I didn't know if I'd make it through one winter up here. Now we're planning for next winter, and the one after that." Elias covered her hand with his. "You'll make it through all of them." "We will," she corrected. "Yeah, we will." That afternoon, a letter arrived. They heard the horse before they saw it. Ben Carver making his first trip up since delivering Mara back in November. He looked exhausted, his horse struggling through the melting snow and mud. "Crow," he called out, "got mail for you." Elias met him outside. "Didn't expect to see you till May. Special delivery. Broker sent it ahead, said it was important." Ben handed over the envelope. "How you been? You and the missus make it through winter all right?" "We're fine." "Good." Most folks didn't think she'd last. Ben glanced at the cabin where Mara had appeared in the doorway. "Guess they were wrong." "Guess they were." Ben tipped his hat to Mara. "Ma'am?" "Mr. Carver." After Ben left, Elias stood holding the envelope, staring at the familiar handwriting. Thomas Hartwell, the marriage broker. "What is it?" Mara asked, coming to stand beside him. "Letter from the broker." Her expression went carefully neutral. "You going to open it?" Elias broke the seal and read. The letter was short, professional. "Mr. Crow, I write to inquire about the success of your recent placement. Miss Alvarez's arrival was documented, but I have received no confirmation of the arrangement's continuation. Given the previous difficulties, I feel obligated to follow up. If the placement has failed, please notify me at your earliest convenience so that I may arrange alternate accommodations for Miss Alvarez and, if you wish, seek another candidate for your situation. Should the arrangement have proven successful, I would appreciate written confirmation for my records. Respectfully, Thomas Hartwell." Elias read it twice, then handed it to Mara without a word. She scanned it quickly, her jaw tightening. When she finished, she looked up at him. "Another candidate," she said flatly. "He doesn't know you stayed, because you haven't told him." There was no accusation in her voice, just a statement of fact. "I didn't think about it. Didn't seem important." Mara folded the letter carefully. "It's important to him. His business depends on successful placements." She paused. "What do you want to do?" Elias took the letter back and walked to the fireplace. Without hesitation, he threw it into the flames. The paper caught immediately, curling and blackening. "I'm writing him back," Elias said, "telling him the arrangement is permanent, that you're my wife, that he can stop looking for candidates because I'm done." Mara watched the letter burn. "You're sure?" "Completely." He turned to face her. "Are you?" "I told you I was staying. I meant it." She crossed her arms. "But I want to write the letter with you. What we say together." They sat at the table with paper and ink. Mara wrote while Elias dictated, both of them crafting the message together. "Mr. Hartwell, the arrangement is permanent. Mara is my wife in every sense that matters. She has proven herself capable, strong, and committed to this life. I will not be requiring your services again. Please close my file. I have found what I was looking for. Elias Crow." Mara added a postscript in her own hand. "Mr. Hartwell, thank you for the placement. This is exactly where I belong. Mara Crow." She signed her new name with confidence, then showed it to Elias. "Mara Crow," he read aloud. "That all right with you?" "Yeah, more than all right." They sealed the letter and set it aside for Ben to collect on his next trip up. But the act of writing it, of declaring themselves finished with the search, felt like closing a door on the past and opening one to the future. That night, Elias finally said the words he'd been holding. They were lying in the loft, the bigger bed they'd built together finally finished and installed. It had taken them 2 weeks of work in the evenings, but it was solid, comfortable, theirs. "Mara," Elias said into the darkness. "I love you." She went still beside him. Then she rolled over to face him, her eyes searching his in the dim light from the banked fire below. "Say it again." "I love you." "You mean it?" "I've never meant anything more." Mara's hand came up to touch his face, her palm rough against his cheek. "I love you too. Have for a while now." Why didn't you say anything? Because you needed to get there on your own, needed to believe it yourself before you could hear it from me. She smiled. But I'm glad you said it first. Elias pulled her close and kissed her, slow and deep. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I never thought I'd have this, he said quietly. A real marriage. Someone who chose me. I'll choose you every day, Mara said. For the rest of my life. They made love that night with a tenderness they hadn't managed before. All the walls finally down, all the fear finally gone. Afterward, they lay tangled together, skin against skin, hearts beating in sync. We're going to build something good here, Mara said sleepily. We already have. No, I mean something bigger, a real legacy. She yawned. Our children will grow up here, strong and capable and free. Our children, Elias repeated, testing the words. Someday, when we're ready. He held her as she drifted off to sleep, his mind full of images he'd never let himself imagine before. A child running through the clearing, teaching them to read the weather, to work the land, to survive and thrive in this hard, beautiful place. Growing old with Mara, their hands weathered together, their lives intertwined completely. It was the future he'd been building toward without knowing it. And now that it was here, real and possible, he wanted it with everything he had. April brought the true thaw. Snow melted into rushing streams, the creek swelled with runoff, and the forest came alive with sound. Birds returned, animals emerged from winter dens, and the world turned from white to brown to green in the span of weeks. Elias and Mara worked from dawn to dusk, preparing for spring. They cleared the area for the garden, built raised beds from logs Elias had cut the previous fall, hauled in soil from the forest floor mixed with composted manure from the animals. This is going to be good, Mara said, surveying their work. Really good. If we can keep the deer out. That's what the fence is for. They'd built it together, a simple barrier of wooden stakes driven into the ground, not pretty but functional. Inside the fence, the garden bed sat ready for planting. What do we plant first? Elias asked. Potatoes. They can handle cold. Then we wait another week for the rest. Mara had brought seeds from her old home, carefully saved and stored. She planted them with the kind of care that came from knowing how precious they were, how much depended on them. Elias watched her work, dirt under her nails, hair pulled back, completely focused. She belonged here. Not just in the general sense, but specifically, her hands in this soil, planting these seeds, building this future. What? She asked, catching him staring. Nothing. Just watching you. Well, stop watching and start helping. These beds aren't going to plant themselves. They worked side by side, planting row after row. Potatoes, carrots, beans, squash, herbs. By the time they finished, the sun was setting and they were both exhausted, filthy, satisfied. Bath, Mara declared. I need a real bath. They'd been heating water all day in anticipation. Elias had built a large wooden tub years ago, big enough for one person to sit in comfortably. They filled it with hot water, and Mara stripped down and climbed in with a groan of pleasure. Heaven, she said, sinking down to her shoulders. Elias sat on the floor beside the tub, content to watch her relax. But after a few minutes, she opened one eye and looked at him. Get in. There's not enough room. Get in anyway. He stripped and climbed in behind her. It was cramped, water sloshing over the sides, but Mara leaned back against his chest with a satisfied sigh. See? Plenty of room. If you say so. They soaked until the water cooled, talking about everything and nothing. The garden. The cabin repairs they still needed to make. Whether they should get another milk cow. What they'd do when the Garretts visited in a few weeks. Simple things. Domestic things. The kind of conversations Elias had never imagined having because he'd never imagined having someone to have them with. You're quiet, Mara said. Just thinking. About? How different everything is now. How different I am. Mara turned in the tub, water splashing, until she was facing him. You're not different. You're just finally letting yourself be happy. Is that what this is? Happy? You tell me. Elias thought about it. The word felt foreign, almost suspicious. He'd been content before, satisfied with his work, proud of what he'd built. But happy? That was something else entirely. Yeah, he said finally. I think I am. Good. Mara kissed him. Because you deserve it. Later, dried off and in clean clothes, they sat outside on the porch they'd built that week. Just a simple overhang with 2 chairs, but it felt like luxury. The evening was warm enough that they didn't need coats. Stars were beginning to appear overhead. First spring evening, Mara said. Won't be many more this nice for a while. No, but they'll come back. And we'll be here to see them. Elias reached over and took her hand. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky darken and the stars multiply, the forest settling into its nighttime rhythms around them. This was peace, real peace, the kind that came from knowing exactly where you belonged and who you belonged with. The Garretts came to visit in early May, bringing news from town and fresh bread from Martha's kitchen. They stayed for dinner, and the cabin felt full in the best way. Voices, laughter, the warmth of friendship. Martha pulled Mara aside while the men talked. You're glowing, she said bluntly. What? You're glowing. I've seen that look before. Martha studied her carefully. You pregnant? Mara blinked, surprised. No, at least I don't think so. Well, keep an eye on it. That's the look. Martha smiled. And if you are, you come get me when it's time. I've delivered half the babies in these mountains. I'll make sure you're taken care of. I will, thank you. How's married life treating you? Better than I expected. Different than I expected. How so? Mara thought about it. I thought it would be harder. Thought we'd fight more, clash more, but we just work together. Like we were always supposed to be doing this. That's how it should be. Marriage isn't about being the same. It's about pulling in the same direction. Martha glanced at Elias across the room. He's different too. Lighter somehow. You're good for him. He's good for me too. Then you did what those other girls couldn't. You saw past the hard parts to what was worth keeping. Martha squeezed her hand. I'm proud of you. Both of you. Before they left, Henry pulled Elias aside. Need any help with spring planting? Daniel and I could come up for a few days, get some of the heavier work done. We're managing, but I appreciate it. You sure? That's a lot of land for 2 people. We'll handle it, but if we need help, you'll be the first to know. Henry nodded. You look good, Elias. Better than I've seen you in years. That woman's doing something right. She is. She's doing everything right. After the Garretts left, Elias and Mara cleaned up together, washing dishes and putting the cabin back to order. I like having people visit, Mara said, but I also like when they leave and it's just us again. Me too. Is that selfish? No, just honest. Elias dried the last plate. We built this place to be ours. It's okay to want to keep it that way most of the time. Good, because I do. May turned into June, and the garden exploded with growth. Green shoots became sturdy plants, flowers became vegetables, and their hard work began paying off. They ate fresh greens for the first time in months, and the taste was almost overwhelming after a winter of preserved food. We did this, Mara said, holding a handful of fresh lettuce. We actually grew this. You sound surprised. I am. I've helped in gardens before, but never one that was completely mine. Ours, she corrected. They spent their evenings in the garden, weeding and retiring and checking progress. It became a ritual, a way to end the day together, watching what they'd built literally grow in front of them. One evening in late June, Mara stood up from weeding and pressed her hand to her stomach with a strange expression. You all right? Elias asked. Yeah, it just felt weird for a second. Weird how? I don't know, like something shifted. She shook it off. Probably just hungry. I skipped lunch. But Elias noticed she was quieter than usual that night, more thoughtful. And when she declined the venison at dinner, something she never did, he started to suspect what Martha had. He didn't say anything. Mara would tell him when she was ready. 3 days later, she did. They were working on repairs to the barn roof when Mara climbed down the ladder and sat heavily on the ground. Elias, yeah? I need to tell you something. He climbed down and sat beside her. All right, I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air between them. Elias felt his heart stop, then start again, faster. You're sure? Pretty sure. All the signs are there. And I'm late. 2 weeks late. How do you feel about it? Mara looked at him. How do you? I asked first. She smiled slightly. Scared, excited, terrified, happy. She took his hand. All of it at once. Yeah, Elias said, me too. You're okay with this? Okay with it? Mara, this is... He stopped, trying to find the words. This is everything. This is the future we talked about, coming real. It's going to change things. I know. We'll have to prepare, build a cradle, make space, figure out how to... She stopped, overwhelmed. Elias pulled her close. We'll figure it out, together, same way we figured out everything else. You're not scared? I'm terrified, but I'm also... He searched for the word. I'm ready. We're ready. Mara pressed her face against his shoulder. I didn't think I wanted this. Kids, family. I thought I just wanted to be left alone. What changed? You, this place, us. She pulled back to look at him. I want to build something that lasts, something bigger than just us. And this, she touched her stomach. This is that. Elias covered her hand with his own, both of them touching the place where their child was growing. We're going to be parents, he said, testing the words. Yeah, we are. They sat together in the dirt beside the barn, the mountains rising around them, the garden growing in the distance, and the future stretching out ahead of them, uncertain, challenging, but theirs. That night, they started planning in earnest. Where the nursery would go, they'd need to expand the cabin, add another room. What they'd need, a cradle, blankets, supplies for the birth. When they'd tell the Garretts, soon so Martha could help when the time came. When do you think? Elias asked. When is it due? If I'm right about when it happened, probably late February, maybe early March. Another winter baby. Born into the cold, into the harshness, into this beautiful, brutal place. We'll be ready, Elias said. Promise? I promise. Mara leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. This is really happening. Yeah, it is. You know what this means, right? We're not just building a life anymore. We're building a legacy. Elias looked around the cabin, at the home they'd made together, at the life they'd built from nothing, at the future taking shape in Mara's body. 7 women had run from this place. 7 women had seen only hardship and isolation, but Mara had seen possibility, had seen partnership, had seen home. And now they were building something that would outlast them both. Yeah, Elias said softly, we are. The summer passed in a blur of preparation and work. Elias started building the addition to the cabin, a small room off the main bedroom that would serve as a nursery. He worked every spare moment, cutting timber, fitting joints, making sure every board was solid and every corner square. Mara helped when she could, but as the pregnancy progressed, Elias found himself insisting she rest more. I'm pregnant, not dying, she'd say, annoyed. I know, but you're also carrying our child. Let me do the heavy work. I've been doing heavy work my whole life, and now you've got someone to share it with. Let me. She'd grumble, but she'd sit, and Elias would catch her hand resting on her growing belly, a small smile on her face, and know she wasn't really angry. By August, the nursery walls were up. By September, it had a roof and a door. Elias built a cradle from pine, sanding it smooth so no splinters could catch tiny skin. Mara sewed blankets from fabric they'd bought on their last trip to town, her stitches careful and even. What if I'm not good at this? She asked one evening, holding up a half-finished blanket. At sewing? At being a mother? Being a baby? Elias set down the piece of wood he was carving, a small toy horse for the baby. What makes you think you won't be? I don't know how. I never had brothers or sisters. Never spent time around babies. She set the blanket aside. What if I do it wrong? There is no wrong. You'll figure it out as you go. Same way we figured out everything else. That's different. This is a person, a whole person who'll depend on us for everything. And we'll give them everything they need. Food, shelter, warmth, love. He moved to sit beside her. You're going to be a good mother, Mara. I know it. How? Because you care about doing it right. Because you're strong and practical and you don't quit when things get hard. He took her hand. And because you already love this baby. I can see it. Mara's eyes were wet. I do. I didn't expect to. Not this soon, but I do. Then that's all that matters. She leaned against him, and they sat together while the fire burned low and the first hints of autumn crept into the mountain air. The garden gave them more than they'd hoped for. They harvested potatoes, carrots, beans, squash, enough to see them through the winter with extra to spare. Mara showed Elias how to preserve and pickle, how to store root vegetables in the cellar so they'd last months. "My father taught me this," she said, packing carrots in sand. "Said self-sufficiency was the only real security." He was right. He usually was. She paused, her hands stilling. "I wish he could meet you. See what we've built." "What would he think?" Mara smiled. "He'd say you were stubborn and too quiet. Then he'd see the cabin, the garden, the way we work together, and he'd approve, in his own way. I wish I could have met him too. He'd like that you don't waste words. He hated men who talk just to hear themselves." She went back to packing carrots. "And he'd love that you gave me space to be myself. That was always his biggest fear, that I'd end up with someone who'd try to make me smaller." Elias thought about the 7 women who'd left, how he'd tried to make space for them, tried not to crowd them, tried to let them be themselves. But they hadn't wanted space. They'd wanted transformation, wanted him to be different, wanted the mountains to be different, wanted the whole life to be something other than what it was. Mara had wanted exactly what he offered: space, honesty, work, partnership. "I could never make you smaller," Elias said. "You're too strong for that." "Good. Because I'd fight you if you tried." "I know. I've seen you argue with the chickens." Mara laughed, the sound filling the cabin. "Those chickens are stubborn. So are you. That's why we get along." In October, they made one last trip down to town before the winter set in. Mara was 5 months along, showing clearly now, moving more carefully but still insisting she could ride. The town reacted exactly as expected. Congratulations from some, surprise from others. A few knowing looks that said people had been betting on whether she'd still be there come fall. She was, and she was staying. At the general store, Hutchins helped them stock up on supplies: extra fabric for baby clothes, lamp oil, coffee, flour, things they couldn't make themselves. "You preparing for a siege?" he asked, tallying up their order. "Just winter," Elias said. "With a baby coming, I suppose you need to be extra careful." "We'll be fine." Hutchins glanced at Mara, who was examining fabric on the other side of the store. "She's tougher than she looks. She's tougher than anyone gives her credit for." "Well, you got lucky, Crow, real lucky." Elias didn't correct him. It wasn't luck. It was Mara choosing to stay, choosing him, choosing this life. Luck implied chance. What they had was built on choice and work and commitment. On the way out of town, they ran into the drunk from their last visit. He'd cleaned up since then, looked more sober, more present. He stopped when he saw Mara, his eyes going to her pregnant belly. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat, "I owe you an apology. What I said last time, that was out of line." Mara studied him. "You remember that?" "Hard to forget." "You put me in my place pretty thoroughly." He shifted uncomfortably. "Just wanted to say I was wrong, and I'm sorry." "Apology accepted." He nodded and walked away. Elias waited until he was out of earshot. "That surprised you," he said. "Yeah, didn't think he'd remember, much less apologize." "You made an impression." Apparently, Mara climbed onto her horse with Elias's help. "Let's go home, I'm tired." The ride back took 2 days again, camping overnight in the same cave they'd used before. But this time, Mara was quieter, more withdrawn. Elias noticed but didn't push. She'd talk when she was ready. That night, lying in their bedrolls, she finally did. "I'm scared, Elias." "Of what?" "Childbirth, the baby, all of it." Her voice was small in the darkness. "Martha said she'd help, but what if something goes wrong? We're so far from town, from a real doctor. Martha's delivered dozens of babies. She knows what she's doing." "But what if it's not enough? What if I—" She stopped, unable to say it. Elias pulled her close. "You're not going to die, and neither is the baby. We're going to get through this together." "You can't promise that." "No, but I can promise I'll be there every second, and I can promise that we'll do everything right, everything we can to keep you both safe." "What if I'm not strong enough?" "You're the strongest person I know. If anyone can do this, it's you." Mara was quiet for a long time. Then, tell me something good about the future, about after the baby comes. Elias thought, we'll teach them everything. How to read the weather, how to work the land, how to be strong and kind and honest. They'll grow up knowing these mountains, knowing how to survive them, and they'll never feel trapped here because it's all they'll know. It'll be home. Will there be more? More children? If you want. I think I do. Not right away, but someday. She shifted against him. I want a full house, kids running around, making noise, making messes. The opposite of how I grew up. Just you and your father? Just us. It was quiet, sometimes too quiet. She paused. That's why I don't mind the silence here. I'm used to it, but I don't want our kids growing up that lonely. They won't. They'll have each other, and us. Mara relaxed slightly. Yeah, they will. They made it home the next day. The cabin had never looked better. Solid, familiar, theirs. Inside, everything was exactly as they'd left it. The nursery waited, almost finished. The garden had died back with the first frost, but the root cellar was full of their harvest. They'd prepared well. They were ready. November came with the first real snow. December brought storms that buried the cabin for days at a time, but inside they were warm, well-fed, content. Mara grew larger, moving more slowly, sleeping more. Elias took over most of the physical work without complaint. He finished the cradle and set it in the nursery. Built shelves for baby clothes and blankets. Made sure the fire stayed hot and the cabin stayed warm. In January, with Mara 7 months along, Martha Garrett made the dangerous trip up the mountain. Had to check on you before the really bad weather hits, she said, stomping snow off her boots. Let me see you, girl. She examined Mara thoroughly, asking questions, checking her size, listening to her concerns. Everything looks good, Martha announced. Baby's in the right position, you're healthy and strong. Should be a straightforward birth. Should be? Mara asked. Nothing's ever guaranteed, but I don't see any warning signs. Martha squeezed her hand. You're going to be fine. When should we call for you? When the pains start coming regular. Elias can ride down. Should take him 3 hours if he pushes. I'll come up and we'll get you through it. Martha stayed for dinner, giving them both last-minute advice and reassurance. Before she left, she pulled Elias aside. She's scared. More than she's letting on. I know. You need to be strong for her. When the time comes, she's going to need you to keep your head. I will. Good man. Martha patted his shoulder. You've surprised a lot of people, Crow, including me. You've built something real here. We built it, both of us. That's the right answer. Keep thinking like that, and you'll do just fine. February arrived with bitter cold and heavy snow. Mara was uncomfortable now, her belly huge, her patience thin. She couldn't sleep well, couldn't get comfortable, couldn't do most of the physical work she was used to. I hate this, she said one morning, frustrated. I hate being useless. You're not useless. You're growing a person. I'm sitting around like a lump while you do everything. For a few more weeks. Then things go back to normal. Normal with a baby. Yeah, normal with a baby. She softened slightly. I didn't mean, I want this baby. I do. I know. I'm just ready for it to be over, to meet them, to see what we made. Elias sat beside her and put his hand on her belly. The baby kicked against his palm, strong and insistent. They're strong, he said, like their mother, like both of us. The pain started on a clear, cold morning in late February. Mara woke Elias before dawn, her face tight. It's time. Elias was on his feet immediately. You sure? I'm sure. They've been coming for an hour. Regular now. He dressed faster than he ever had in his life. I'm going to get Martha. You stay here. Keep warm. Don't do anything. Elias? Mara caught his hand. I'll be fine. Just go fast and come back faster. He kissed her hard. I love you. I love you too. Now go. The ride down the mountain was brutal. Elias pushed the horse harder than he should have, taking risks with the icy trail, not caring. All he could think about was Mara, alone in the cabin, in pain. He made it to the Garretts in 2.5 hours. Martha took one look at his face and started packing her bag. Henry saddled a fresh horse for Elias while Daniel got Martha's ready. How far apart? Martha asked. She said an hour when I left. That was 2.5 hours ago. Then we need to move. The ride back was even faster. Martha kept pace, both of them focused only on getting to Mara in time. They found her in the cabin, walking slowly around the main room, one hand on her lower back, breathing through contractions. She looked up when they burst in, relief clear on her face. "About time," Martha laughed. "Let's see what we're working with." The labor went on for hours. Mara was strong, just like Martha had said, but the pain was intense and relentless. Elias stayed by her side the whole time, letting her grip his hand hard enough to bruise, wiping sweat from her face, murmuring encouragement. "I can't do this," Mara gasped at one point. "Yes, you can." "It's too much. You're the strongest person I know. If anyone can do this, it's you." He repeated his words from months ago and saw recognition flash in her eyes. "You said that before." It was true then. It's true now. She bore down with the next contraction, screaming with the effort. Martha worked calmly, efficiently. "You're close. Almost there. One more big push." "I can't." "You can. Come on, Mara. Your baby wants to meet you." Elias held her, supporting her weight, feeling her shake with exhaustion and effort. And then, with one final scream, the baby came. The sound of crying filled the cabin. High, thin, indignant. "It's a girl," Martha announced, holding up the tiny, red, perfect creature. "A beautiful, healthy girl," Mara sobbed, reaching for the baby. Martha cleaned her quickly and placed her in Mara's arms. Elias stared at them both, his wife and his daughter, and felt something inside him break open and remake itself. "We have a daughter," Mara said, wonder in her voice. "Yeah, we do." The baby had dark hair like Mara and pale eyes that might turn any color. She was small, fragile, absolutely perfect. "What do we call her?" Mara asked. They discussed names but never settled on one. Now looking at his daughter, Elias knew. "Ada," he said, "after my mother." Mara looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "Ada Crow. Perfect." Martha finished the rest of the work, got Mara settled, made sure everything was as it should be. By the time she was done, Mara was exhausted, half asleep, but smiling. "You did well," Martha told her. "Both of you. I'm proud." She stayed the night, sleeping by the fire, ready in case anything went wrong. But nothing did. Mara slept, Ada slept, and Elias sat in the rocking chair he'd built, holding his daughter, unable to look away. Martha left in the morning with promises to check on them in a few weeks. And then it was just the three of them. The first weeks were brutal in a different way than labor. Ada cried constantly, needed feeding every few hours, barely slept. Mara was healing, exhausted, overwhelmed. Elias felt helpless, unable to do the one thing his daughter needed most. But slowly, they figured it out. Learned Ada's rhythms, her cries, what soothed her and what didn't. They took turns walking her, rocking her, singing to her in the middle of the night. They learned to sleep in shifts, to eat when they could, to accept that nothing would be the same as before. And it wasn't. It was better. "She smiled at me," Mara said one morning in March, her face glowing. "I swear she smiled." Probably gas. It was not gas. It was a smile. Elias looked at his daughter, at the tiny person they'd made together, and felt his heart expand in ways he hadn't known were possible. This was what the other women hadn't understood. It wasn't about the cabin or the location or the hardship. It was about building something that mattered, something that would outlast them, something real. Winter loosened its grip. April brought warmer days. May brought the return of green to the mountains. And through it all, Ada grew. She became more alert, more responsive, more herself. "She looks like you," Elias said one evening, watching Mara nurse the baby. "She has your stubbornness. That's all you," Mara laughed. "Maybe we're both stubborn." Definitely. In June, they planted the garden again, this time with Ada in a sling on Mara's chest, watching the world with wide, curious eyes. They worked the land together, just like before, but now with a witness to their labor. "She'll grow up knowing how to do this," Mara said. "Won't even question it. It'll just be normal." "That's what we want, isn't it?" "Yeah, it is." The Garretts visited in July, bringing gifts for Ada. A blanket Martha had knitted, a carved wooden rattle from Henry, a promise from Daniel to teach her to ride when she was old enough. "You've done well," Henry said to Elias while the women cooed over the baby. "Built yourself a real family. We built it together. That's the key, isn't it? Can't do it alone." Henry looked at Mara, then back to Elias. "I remember when you first came up here, thought you were crazy, trying to live alone on this mountain. Turns out you weren't crazy, just waiting for the right partner." "I didn't know I was waiting. I thought I was done." "Sometimes the thing we need finds us when we've stopped looking." Henry clapped him on the shoulder. "You're a lucky man, Crow." "I know, but it still wasn't luck. It was choice. Mara choosing to stay, Elias choosing to let her in. Both of them choosing each day to build something together instead of tearing it down. That night, after the Garretts left, Elias and Mara sat outside on the porch with Ada between them in her cradle, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and pink. "Do you ever think about those other women?" Mara asked. "Sometimes." "Do you wonder what would have happened if one of them had stayed?" "No, because it wouldn't have been this." Elias gestured to the cabin, the garden, the baby. "This only works because it's us. You and me. Why do you think I stayed when they didn't?" Elias considered it. "Because you weren't looking for something different. You were looking for exactly what this is." "And what is it?" "Hard work. Real partnership. Freedom to be yourself without apology." He looked at her. "They wanted me to change. You just wanted me to show up. I wanted you to be real. No pretense, no performance, just honest effort. That's all I know how to give." "I know. That's why it works." Mara reached over and took his hand. "We're not perfect, Elias. We fight sometimes. We get frustrated. We make mistakes." "Yeah. But we don't quit. That's the difference. We don't run when things get hard." Elias squeezed her hand. "No, we don't." Ada stirred in her sleep, making small sounds. They both looked at her, their daughter, their future. "She's going to have siblings," Mara said. "Eventually, when I'm ready." "How many?" "I don't know. 3, maybe? 4? Elias smiled. "A full house." "Exactly." Mara leaned her head on his shoulder. "We'll fill this place with life, with kids and laughter and work and love. We'll build something that lasts generations. Our legacy. Our legacy." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set and the stars came out, the mountains' dark shapes against the darkening sky, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them. A year ago, Elias had been alone, convinced he'd always be alone, resigned to a life of solitude. 7 women had tried and failed to build a life here with him. He'd given up hope of ever finding someone who could. And then Mara had arrived through a snowstorm, stepped off that wagon with steady confidence, and everything had changed. She hadn't come to be saved, she'd come to build. And together, they'd built something stronger than either of them could have managed alone. Not a perfect life. There was no such thing up here, or anywhere else. But a real one, an honest one. One built on mutual respect and shared work, and the kind of love that came from choosing each other every single day, no matter how hard it got. That was worth more than perfection. That was worth everything. "Elias," Mara said softly. "Yeah?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up, for letting me in, for building this with me." "I should be thanking you. You stayed when everyone else ran." "I stayed because you were worth staying for." She lifted her head to look at him. "And because this place, this life, it's exactly what I needed." Elias kissed her, slow and gentle, a promise and a thank you, and a declaration all at once. When they pulled apart, Ada was awake, looking up at them with wide, wondering eyes. "Hey there, little one," Mara said, picking her up. "You're awake." Ada made a small sound, not quite a word, but close. "She's trying to talk," Elias said. "Soon. Before we know it, she'll be running around getting into everything. And we'll teach her how to read the weather, how to work the land, how to survive up here. How to be strong," Mara added, "and kind and honest, like her mother. Like both of us." They went inside as the last light faded, closing the door against the mountain night. The fire was warm, the cabin solid, their family complete. And Elias Crow, the man 7 women had abandoned, The man who'd built his life in isolation and resignation knew with absolute certainty that he was no longer alone. He had Mara. He had Ada. He had a future filled with possibility instead of emptiness. He had everything he'd never believed he deserved. And he would spend the rest of his life earning it, protecting it, building on it, because that's what you did when you found something real. You didn't take it for granted. You didn't assume it would last on its own. You showed up every day. You did the work. You made the choice to stay, to fight, to build. That was the lesson those 7 women had taught him, even if they hadn't meant to. Love wasn't something you found ready-made. It was something you built, piece by piece, choice by choice, day by day. And he and Mara had built something that would last. Not because it was easy, but because it was worth it. The mountains stood eternal outside their door, harsh and beautiful and unforgiving. Inside, warmth and light and love filled every corner of the small cabin. This was home. This was family. This was the life Elias had stopped believing in. And it was real. Years would pass. More children would come. The cabin would expand to hold them all. The garden would grow larger. The work would continue, season after season, year after year. But the foundation would remain the same. 2 people who'd chosen each other, who'd chosen this life, who'd chosen to build instead of run. That was enough. That was everything. And as Elias stood with his wife and daughter in the firelight, the man who'd been abandoned 7 times finally understood what he'd been waiting for all along. Not someone to complete him, not someone to make the hard parts easy, not someone to transform him into something he wasn't, just someone to stand beside him, to work with him, to choose him every day, the same way he chose her. Someone like Mara. And that made all the difference.